Hey, happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome back to the Freight Break, the official podcast of the Broker Carrier Summit and the BCS Freight Network. I'm your host, Dan Lindsey. Again, happy Tuesday. Welcome back. We are less than 100 days out from our next Broker Carrier Summit in Indianapolis, Indiana, April 28th to May 2nd. Summit Week, as we are now dubbing it. It's going to be at the historic Union Station and Crown Plaza Hotel in Indianapolis. So if you are a broker, carrier, or in any way associated with the logistics industry, you do not want to miss it. It's going to be our biggest. It's also going to be our best summit yet. I am confident. I got a sneak peek behind the scenes at the agenda as well as the speaker list. And if you thought Fort Worth and Kansas City last year were fantastic, well, you need to come to Indianapolis. We got something special planned for you. All right. Another event coming down the pipe here is Manifest. Broker Carrier Summit is going to be there. This is taking place in February, February 10th through the 13th. If you use our promo code, you can save $200 by registering. Go to www.partner.manifest./BCS to use our promo code. We will be there. And one of the reasons we will be there, in addition to interacting with our tech partners and sponsors, is going to be to launch our big road tour in partnership with Freight Movement. We are going to be at the Venetian Casino at the Black Tap to kick off the 12 cities in 12 months big road tour. You can sign up going to the Eventbrite link at the bottom of the screen. All right. One more thing before we kick off the show here today. As you know, our show is all about delivering practically applicable knowledge that helps freight professionals grow their business. And if you are a freight broker, what could be more practically applicable than finding load coverage 70% faster and streamlining your entire loads life cycle? With TIE software, TIE TMS, as a freight broker, you understand the value of streamlining your operations through your technology platforms. That's why TIE is designed to do just that, streamlining your workflows and saving you time and money at every stage of the shipment life cycle. With TIE TMS, you can focus on providing top-notch service to your customers and cultivating lasting partnerships while allowing TIE to do all of the work in the background for you. So go ahead and give them a call or visit them at tie-software.com for more information. All right, on the show today, we have what is affectionately known as Freight RobinHood on the line. We also have Mr. Tristan Bordallo, both good friends of the BCS. Good to see you, gentlemen.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Doing well, gentlemen. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Good. Well, as you guys both know, one of the topics that really gave birth to the Broker Carrier Summit and the BCS movement in general has been this topic of freight fraud and double brokering and scams and identity theft that has absolutely just plagued the industry the last few years. And so I wanted to get you guys on because you have some unique perspectives coming from the carrier side, and wanted you guys to just share your story. But first, let's RobinHood, Brian, as I know you, let's go ahead and start with you. And how did you get in contact with the BCS? And go ahead and tell us how you and I got connected.
So I think I was just on Google, if I remember right, and I just came across the BCS, and I'm like, you know what, this sounds like a good thing. My company was at the beginning stages, and what I wanted to do, the whole reason I went to the BCS was I wanted to meet brokers. I got tired of brokers. Every time I call them on the phone, they say, no, we can't load your truck. You're too new. You don't have any inspections. Too many no's. And it's like, all right, I need to go meet these people. Because once I meet them, I felt confident enough, that they would probably change their mind. And I would also be able to understand more about the industry. So I reached out to you about some ideas that I had. And actually, I sat on one of the panels with Highway and Mariner Logistics and a few others discussing the fraud from the carrier's perspective and what I've ran into and how I'm able to try to combat that on my side.
Excellent. Tristan, how did you and I get connected, my friend?
No, I was just on LinkedIn, saw Broker Carrier Summit. And actually that was the first event that I've ever gone to in the last 20 years of being in trucking in my own little world. So I was like, okay, who are these guys? Let's go meet some LinkedIn friends. That's how I met Brian as well. Brian was at a a workshop, and he was talking a lot of shit. So I go, I like this guy. And I went up to him afterwards, took a selfie like I always do. And now Brian and I have, we text back and forth. We've become really good, texting friends and calling friends and giving each other, experience shares and advice. So it's pretty awesome.
Very cool. Yeah. Talking ship and moving ship, right?
Yeah.
All the ship. Well, very, very cool. So, Brian, you and I had a conversation. It was right after the Broker Carrier Summit in Fort Worth, Texas. You met a broker at the summit, and you apparently you've developed a unique approach to finding out whether or not a load is legitimate. Let's talk to us how you do that.
So one of the keys, and everybody knows this if you're a carrier, is if the email address is a Gmail address, it's almost always going to be a fraudulent load. There's some other things that kind of give you an idea of what a fraudulent load is that I would rather not say. But when I catch a fraudulent load on the board, I tend to want to book that load. The reason I want to book that load is I want to steal that load back, and I want to gain the trust of that broker. So it goes back to me being told no all the time. I told you when I first started the company, all these brokers told me no. The only people that wanted to load my truck was TQL and CH Robinson, which the whole industry hates. So what I wanted to do was to stop the no's. And I felt the only way to stop the no's was to fight the fraud myself. So the main issue that I'm having is I still don't have any inspections. Listen, I've been driving since 96. I've only had, 2 level 1s, and I think 1 level 2. I've never had a level 3 inspection. So here I am driving down the roads. I've got 18 months almost now on my authorities with 0 inspections, and I'm still getting told no. So the no is the only reason is no is they think I'm a fraudulent company. So how do I prove I'm not a fraudulent company? I fight the fraud. That's how I look at it in my mind. So if you're ready for me to get into that story, I left the summit on Friday morning. I went back to my truck and I started to book a load. And the very first load that I found was paying really well. Summit was in DFW area. It was leaving from DFW. It was going over to Georgia, and it was paying, like $220 a mile, which is a little bit above the rates. And I started looking, and it's like, this ain't a legit load. So what I did was I called DAT. I actually have a good relationship with DAT now. I call them up. They know who I am. I say, hey, is this a fraudulent load? They get in their little system. They check it, and they're like, yeah, that person's been hacked, whatever. And so they'll go ahead and block the load. They'll block that broker. They'll block that load until they can get on their end what's going on straightened out. Well, I just continue. I'll go ahead and get a hold of that fraudster, and I'll book that load. Once I receive that rate con, what I'll do is I'll call that shipper, and I'll say, I need y'all to sit down because what I'm about ready to tell you is to freak you out. I'll call that shipper up, and I'll say, your load's about ready to get stolen, hijacked, or whatever. You need to call your broker. So that's exactly what happened. I left the BCS. I booked a load that was fraudulent. I called the shipper. They're freaking out. And I mean, they're freaking. This guy's calling saying your freight's about ready to be stolen. Who is this guy? So they called their broker.
Do they think that you're about to steal their load whenever you call and say that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to warn them that this load is about ready to get either hijacked, either the carrier's not going to get paid, or the load's going to disappear and get cross-docked somewhere. I know one of the two things is going to happen. So I called that shipper, and I said, you need to lock down your load. Don't let that leave nowhere. You need to call your broker immediately. If they have any questions, tell them to call me. And then next thing I know, my phone's ringing. And there's this really nice lady on the other end, and she is absolutely freaking out. Who are you? Why are you calling my shipper? What are you talking about? Stealing loads? And she's just freaking out. And she's like, I told her, I said, it's a fraudulent load. I have a rate con. She's like, send that to me. I sent her the rate con. She's like, oh, yeah, that's my load. And I'm like.
And she's never talked to you at this point, yes?
She's never heard of me, never talked to me. And this conversation went so fast. It clicked to me 5 or 10 minutes later. Wait a minute. What was the name of your brokerage? And she's like, yada, yada. And I'm like, oh, go get John or Dan, because I just had lunch with them yesterday. And she's like, wait a minute, how do you know our owners? She's freaking out. Like I said, I just met them yesterday at the BCS. I just had lunch with them. So it went from being very skeptical and fearing what I'm doing to this guy's trustworthy. She went and checked up on me, got someone on the phone that remembered me from the BCS, and it went well from there. So I ended up pulling that load for them because they didn't trust anybody else to pull it at that point. But if it wasn't for the connection at the BCS, I would have never gotten that load. That load probably would have gotten stolen. They would have never trusted me when I called them and said, y'all are about ready to lose a load.
Yeah. So how often do you intentionally book fraudulent loads to make sure you are able to inform the shipper and the broker that something dodgy is going down?
All right. So I've been driving the truck myself. I just recently got out of the truck. So I'm not just hunting the boards. I'm actually looking for loads in my area. So if I'm sitting in Atlanta and I'm trying to book a truck out of Atlanta and I see a fraudulent load in Atlanta, I'm going ahead and stop what I'm doing. I'll call DAT. I'll try and get a hold of the broker that's been hacked, who the load is being posted under, to let them know that their DAT account's been hacked. And then I'll go ahead and try to book that load as well. I don't have the time to sit here and just search the whole country and look for fraudulent loads. I wish I did. But anytime I'm in any area and I come across a fraudulent load, I try to book it. But it isn't that simple because I've actually run across fraudulent brokers and their only end game is to get my company's information. So I have to be very careful in what I'm doing and what I'm saying and what information, if any, I'm sending so that they're not able to steal my company's information.
Gotcha. So Tristan, you've been on both sides of the coin here in the freight world. You've been a broker. You've also owned and operated a carrier. What are some of the things that you've seen, best practices, if you will, that you can employ or you have employed to mitigate fraud, minimize the exposure to your company and to the brokers you work with?
I mean, I'm doing both still, right? Like it's not past tense. I'm still in the, I still own the trucks and I'm still running a brokerage. So what I do is just go back to the basics, right? Like the basics is what Brian was talking about, getting to know who actually hauls your freight. The current state of our trucking, like the trucking industry, is just a breeding ground for fraud. I mean, that's the reason why. I mean, we wanted to find out. So we messed around and now we're finding out, right? Like the reality is when middlemen have no skin in the game, they control pricing, they have no liability, no exposure to risk. Dude, it's so easy for me to rip people off. Like I know both sides so well that I mean, if I wanted to, I could go to Glendale right now and say, hey guys, you guys want to really learn how to do some fraud? You know what I mean? And Brian, and it's
I'll show you how to open up 75 MCs the right way.
I mean, it's and it sucks, right? Like because they know both sides, right? They know that Brian as a carrier or Tristan as a carrier needs money to run, so they're going to put this crazy rate on DAT or truck stop to fish for our information, and then they know brokers are attracted to cheap carriers. We're addicted to cheap carriers. So what happens is they're going to put in a rate that's so cheap and they trick both sides and they disappear. And that's where we need to get together. I mean, Broker Carrier Summit has a really good, solution to making sure that we're seeing each other face to face, knowing who you're dealing with. But it also goes to show that there are people that care, but they just need to understand more of the cost structure and what it costs to run a real trucking company, because then they'll understand, hey man, like you're right. Like in order for me to get a great carrier, I should have someone like Brian or Tristan, and they could show me exactly what it would cost to get a great carrier on these loads. I mean, because we're not riding into the sunset with all this money as a carrier. I mean,
yeah.
We just want to get paid and be sustainable to serve you guys tomorrow. And I didn't understand that as a broker. I mean, I say it all the time. Like I'm a born again broker, man.
Yeah. Well, that goes to one of the things we talked about even as early at the first Indianapolis summit in the spring of 23. And I apologize, I dropped off there. But I'm still on this rural internet that's got us all messed up out here. So, but yeah, even at the first summit in Indianapolis in 23, we were talking about one of the 10 rules or 10 commandments of good freight partnerships. And one of them was don't do desperate. And that goes for brokers and that goes for carriers. Don't take freight out of desperation. If the rate seems too good to be true, or if the load conditions seem too good to be true, or something doesn't add up, even though you really want it to add up, don't take the load. It's better to not take a load out of desperation than to take one and put your company at risk for, one step closer to closing because you don't get paid on a load.
Yeah, I mean, going back to adding up, right? If it doesn't add up, and so one of these brokers that I met on Broker Care Summit, I'm not going to say who it is, but I was talking to the CFO, and he was saying, "Oh, help me find great carriers in California." And I'm like, "Well, how much do you know about running a company in California?" I mean, I can't do it for your $1.80. Like, I'm sorry, you know the finances. Your title is CFO,
right?
So you should understand that budget is not going to get you the carrier, and that it's called insanity if you keep doing the same thing over. Like, I don't know how to make it cheaper, Dan. Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Maybe I could hire drivers in Mexico. I mean, they're just 3 hours away, right? Like, I could do all of the things to meet the demand. But again, I mean, I have a responsibility to the public.
Well, and again, brokerages don't know the costs structures associated with operating a motor carrier, and vice versa. Carriers don't appreciate the cost structures that a broker is set up to operate under.
I would say the BCS helped me change that. I got to go in and meet Axle Logistics and see the behind the scenes and how many people they have working there and their whole entire structure that they got. And it was insane. I understand what their overhead costs are, but at the same time, when it comes to a carrier, we're all small carriers. What they say? Some 90% of the carriers in the country are all small, got 1, 2, or 3 trucks.
Less than 5 trucks, fewer than 5 trucks.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're trying to live off of 1, 2, 3 loads a day, and they're running through hundreds of loads a day. So when you have those kind of margins where you're running through hundreds of loads and you can do $100 on each load times hundreds of loads, that gives you your money. But when we're doing 1 or 2 loads and we need $400 or $500 to make a profit that day to cover our expenses for that day, I mean, that's just what it is. So, it goes back to these mega carriers. They're able to spread their costs out over all their trucks. But when you got 1 or 2 trucks, that 1 or 2 trucks decides whether you eat that day or not. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
I mean, you got to be intelligent enough to know that we all have different realities, right? Like, my reality as a carrier and a reality as a broker is different. Brokers, we have to meet shippers' requirements, but we have to communicate that to the carrier. But a lot of us misrepresent the cost of running a trucking company. And what Brian was saying is, we could go to Knight Swift. Go ahead, go ask them for a truck. Go ask Covenant for a truck. They could buy it at scale, but you're not going to get a truck today. So expecting us to do it for that rate and then misrepresenting our rate to a carrier so you can make a profit, that's just irresponsible. But if you're going to go to a shipper and say, look, this is what it costs. I have an awesome human being behind it. I don't have to vet them, but this is what it costs. Is there any way you could give me more so that I could support these guys? Because these are the guys I want to deal with. I don't want to go to DAT. I want to build relationships. Yeah. I want to be able to support these guys that have 5 or less trucks, 10 or less trucks, because their service is way better. Unless you want me to go and knock on, a publicly traded company's door and ask them, can you give me some trucks? And I guarantee you're not going to get those trucks.
No, you're not. Well, and one of the most frustrating things about being a broker, I can say this because I can't even remember how many RFPs and how many spreadsheets I filled out and went cross-eyed over and, spent 3 or.
Oh man, Dan keeps disappearing on these. He's getting double. I think they're using a double digital system. Just kidding.
There he is. Welcome back, Dan.
Yeah, we got to improve the Wi-Fi system here. I don't know what's going on. It wasn't a problem for the first 5 or 6 episodes we did, and then we started talking about transparency, and it glitched out. We talked about fraud, and it glitched out. I think it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, I think we're getting hacked by the double brokers.
It could be. I would not put it past them. Those guys are learning new tricks every day. But no, I was saying one of the frustrating things as a broker is you spend 3 or 4 weeks working on a 4,000 lane RFP, and at some level you have to source those rates. Right. whether it's internal sourcing from carriers you've used in the past, whether it's going to DAT or truck stop or some other external source and finding out what the average rate is. Maybe you could, use that as a benchmark. But one of the things that I saw a lot of brokers do is they'll go to an external source for rate data, and then they'll go to a completely different a completely different source to actually find their carriers. So if you go to DAT and get rates, you better be going to DAT to get your trucks too. Likewise for sourcing internally. If you're looking internally in your own company's history for the carriers that ran those lanes, you better be going to that same source to actually find the trucks when those loads are going. Otherwise, you're going to be working with two different sets of data, and you're not going to be able to service your customers well at all.
Yeah, I mean, that goes with underwriting the data that you have, and no one underwrites that data. Their reality is their reality. They're not willing to understand our reality. And, there's just like when you're building a carrier capacity, right? Like you're building it based on a budget that you think it costs to run a trucking company. So you're out there misrepresenting that to your customers, thinking you could join an RFP and saying like, it's like doing it backwards. We're the only industry that does it backwards. Like I can't imagine going to, with all the fires that have happened in California. And I can't imagine going to one of those insurers and saying, hey, look, there's 100 of us. Do you want our business or not? But we want to pay $200 a month. Look, they're exposed to all this risk. That's what they do. And you're not even paying us for the risk to be out. They don't even understand that. Everyone talks about rate per mile, right? He's gone.
It's all right. Keep going, buddy.
Yeah. Well, I forgot where I'm talking about rate
per mile.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've had an issue where I've called brokers and I've tried to explain to them what my costs are. They don't want to hear it. They don't care. Either they think I'm lying or they just really don't care. And that's kind of frustrating. When I tell them, hey, this lane's been paying $1,300 for the last 30 days. Why are you trying to pay $7? I just had that situation happen yesterday where I was in Georgia. Rates have been paying $1,300 for the past 30 days, and that's what I said is they're trying to push $7, and I called the guy and I'm like, why are you trying to push $7? We got into it. That's what you hear. And then I try to explain to him, the cost associated with running the truck and paying the driver and paying the insurance. I can't do it. I just can't run that load.
Well, Brian, I mean, to their defense is that they've joined an RFP. They have the requirements to meet those loads that they are supposed to cover. So they don't have time to listen to us and ask us about it. So ask us listen to what our costs are. And remember, that's a carrier sales rep. We can't blame him for not caring. He has to cover 100 loads on the board. So I can't blame him, right? It comes from the top and it comes from the front loading side of things. They have to understand those costs before going into an RFP. I don't go to an RFP anymore because I'm like, dude, this is just, when you see Uber, I don't want to race to the bottom. I'm going to go look for customers that care about me and that I care about, because that's just the biggest. I'd rather live in the middle than try to get these enterprise accounts that everyone else is, adhering to their rate requirements when they're not because they don't understand it. Because why am I going to go show up with all these expenses? Knowing the expenses, first of all, being like, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but the absolute truth is it costs money to run a trucking company. And you can't represent it without having one. I'm like, dude, the world would be a better place if if they had a truck, a trailer, and an operator, and be compliant, do all their maintenance, do everything that they need to do, and charge the rates that they get based on the data. I guarantee you, they will not be doing what they're doing. Because,
I think,
I don't know.
I think the meetings that we had at the BCS, meeting the new brokers and the new carriers opened up some understanding there. And AJ over at Mariner, what he does as a broker is he'll find the carrier first and say, okay, I'm looking at bidding on this lane. What would your rate be for this lane? he gets the carrier first before he goes to the broker. And that makes sense to me because now he knows what the rate is going to be for this side and the rate on this side, and then what he can bid it at. So if you're trying to get a rate and then try to find a carrier to meet that rate, it seems backwards to me, but that's how the industry works.
Well, Brian, 20 years ago, that's how it used to work. And there's still amazing brokers like that, like us. I hate going on DAT. I actually wanted to cancel DAT, but that's why I don't know if you guys noticed that post I had. It's auto renewals, and me, I didn't know that there was an auto renewal clause in all these contracts. But the reality is, I'd rather just call carriers and say, you know what, I'm going to build my business model. Forget what everyone else is doing. I'm going to build it like what I really think is going to work for me. It might not work for everyone else, because remember, everyone's in it for a different reason. I'm in it to really provide value.
Yeah.
I'm here to say, okay, look, I found an awesome carrier. Is this what you want? Or I could go to DAT and just mess around and find out.
Yeah. Well, that underscores the importance of relationships, and that's what if we do RFPs wrong in the industry, we definitely do relationships wrong and backwards in the industry as well. We're in one of the most commoditized markets, it seems, in the history. As long as I've been in freight, it's been highly commoditized. So how do you guys go about building relationships with those brokers or with those carriers, Tristan, to enhance the value that you bring to them?
I mean, you got to build the trust, right? Like, you only get one reputation. That's it.
Yep.
In any industry you go to, it doesn't matter where you're at, or even in life, you get one reputation. Maybe you'll get halfway, get half of it back or something like that. But the reality is, you got one chance to prove it. And I understand now, like because there's carrier sales. I come from a place where you did everything. You got the carrier, you got the customer, so you understand every side of that business, like trying to get a customer and understanding their needs, and then understanding the carrier's needs. And as a true broker, like as a true middleman in any business, you should be facilitating that and earning your dollars versus forcing one side and taking advantage of a side that doesn't have the data, the tools, the access to that load or the resources to continuously go after accounts and use that over their head. I mean, you're doing it all wrong. I mean, you're going to make a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know about. I'd rather not have to deal with that. Like, I'd seriously rather go out of business if there's no value for a broker like me or a broker that Brian was talking about. Then you know what? I'll go do something else, because I'm not willing to just do it for revenue. I mean, but I know mine. I know my business strategy has worked, because I haven't had to get a job for 21 years.
Yeah.
I think what you were saying about not wanting to use DAT, the carriers are the same way. We don't want to use DAT. We don't want to use truck stop. It's an expense. It's unnecessary. And the time. Yesterday, I sat in front of the computer probably 6 hours just trying to find one load for one truck that met the criteria that I needed, where the driver needed to be, the mileage that needed to run within his hours, and the rate that I needed. And it's too much. I would rather a broker call me on Monday and say, I got loads for you for next week or for the whole week. Here they are, and let's go run your truck. That relationship is one of the main reasons why I went to the BCS, was to establish that. And as we were talking about with the relationships at the BCS, Tristan, you remember I gave you a call. One of those fraudulent loads that I found on the board was actually a fraudulent broker that was fishing for carriers' information. And because of my relationship with you, I was able to call you, and you were able to use your tools to go and do a background check on this broker for me and warn me, hey, they're not cool. So those relationships absolutely matter. And like I said, right now I'm on the side where I'm able to pass information back and forth. It hasn't materialized for me yet where a broker's calling me and saying, we can book your truck for a week. And a lot of it has to do with the market. Maybe the broker has loads from, let's say, Indianapolis going to Atlanta 5 days a week. Well, he doesn't have something from Atlanta back to Indy or Atlanta over to Dallas. I'd have to do something with another broker. But that's okay. I wouldn't mind doing that if we could all come together and collaborate. We can all make money in this industry without somebody taking home all the money and the other person going home broke. And again, if we're not all on DAT and truck stop, we're eliminating the fraud right there. Just going straight to each other and having that trust.
Well, also going back to the basics, Brian, like you were saying, is actually building a relationship. It does take a longer time, right? You're not going to get to cover 100 loads in a day by building relationships. But that's why there's hyper growth companies, and that's what they focus on. And that's fine. Like they have I'm sure they have the insurance for all this fraud, and they continue to do it because because they don't care, right? If you're not caring, you're getting jacked, and you're going to face fraud. But if you go back to the basics of building it, like I really don't care to have all of this revenue and to do all of this work and have all this collateral damage. Like as a human being, like I don't want to be I just want to sleep at night.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. It's like going back to being able to sleep at night.
Well, I wonder if that premise is even accurate, because you think about all the additional things that somebody who we'll call them bottom feeders or lives at the bottom of the barrel, or all the extra crap that they have to deal with, dealing with double brokers, dealing with fraudsters, dealing with late deliveries, dealing with all of this stuff. At the end of the day, they trade so much time away messing with all those different things. I wonder if they end up making more money at all.
Yeah, I've joined the race to zero, or to the bottom, and it's not fun. So I had to learn, and I'm hoping they'll learn, right? But some of these kids, they're just, and I could say that now, but like some of these kids just they just don't know. You can't blame them, right? I don't blame them. It's the system that they work in. It's not really, it's not us holding them back or they just don't have enough knowledge, and it's the system, and they're getting paid for it. It's just a job to them, and not until it really clicks to them. Because when I started, I had to do everything. I had to go find the account. I had to go find the carriers, and back then we didn't even have TMSs. Actually, Ty, I've seen that. That was one of our first TMSs that he built, and it was crazy because I'm like, wow, you could actually see all these LTL rates come through. And we used to have to memorize all the carriers that went to, Nevada or Georgia, and we'd have to memorize who's who. And we only worked with 3 or 4 carriers. We didn't have all these choices. And that's why I love LTL so much. And because I feel that you can't call and negotiate with an LTL carrier. Like, that a low bottom carrier is going to rail it. It's going to take 2 weeks. It's going to damage your freight. They're not going to have enough insurance. Like, it's all there for you to know. And then if you use a top tier carrier, it's going to be easy communication. Like your claims are going to be paid. They handle the freight better. They move the freight better. Like, and you get to see it. But with truckloads, like a carrier like me or Brian, who could communicate really well, we're lumped in with everyone else because based on the data, like we're just pushed towards that. This is the data. This is what you guys have to do it because I know more than you because I have the account.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things too. So the reliance on things like inspections. You ask, a broker, what does an inspection mean? You ask 4 different brokers at different experience levels, you're going to get 5 different answers. Yeah. Most of them, when you say an inspection, they a lot of them you think you're talking about an inside internal inspection where you do basically PM on your truck, right? But that's not the case at all. Brian, you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago where, again, if your equipment is clean and you're running legal and you have no issues, with your equipment, you're not likely going to get pulled over for an inspection. So basically the fact that you have the more inspections under your belt means you have more problems with your equipment. So maybe that's not a good metric for us to be using.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, okay, I live in California. My business is based in California. Talk about inspections, okay? You have California inspections. You got 90-day, that you have to keep up, not annual. So the state of California, they want to do inspections, right? They love that, but they don't have the resources. And then you think about federal. I think Matt Leffler said it best, where you have 10% of the carriers out there that are actually being inspected throughout the whole United States, and 1 out of 5 are being put out of service. So if you really think, what happened to the 90%? If you were a carrier and you were operating and you knew that you had a 90% chance of not getting any sort of inspections, would you think you'd be doing your maintenance? You think you'd be looking out after your equipment? Like, it doesn't, I just don't get it. And our brothers, our sisters, our mom, our daughter, our sons are going to be driving next to these guys.
Yeah. So we talked about inspections before, and inspections has kind of been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, because I get tired of calling a broker and saying, I can't use you because you don't have any inspections. So when you start talking to many of these brokers, as you were saying, Dan, they don't understand what they're talking about. I've had many brokers, on the phone with me. Maybe they're a new guy, they haven't been in the industry very long. And they're like, hey, just go over to the Loves, get an inspection, upload it up to DAT or upload it to Carrier 411, and you're good. Well, that is an annual inspection performed by a mechanic. And that's just a DOT annual inspection. You keep a piece of paper in your truck, and you put a little sticker on the side of your truck that says that you're operating equipment that's been certified as a mechanic as road legal. Every single piece of equipment on the interstates has to have this inspection, whether it's a truck, whether it's a trailer. I think even the dollies that the pup trailers have, I think they have to have their own inspection as well. Every piece of equipment has to have an inspection sticker, and a form. If I get pulled over by a police officer for speeding and he says, let me see your DOT inspection, and I don't have that in my truck, it's a ticket to the driver and it's a ticket to the company. So an annual inspection is grossly different, vastly different than what is a DOT roadside inspection performed by the police. So the ones that are performed by police officers are the only ones that show up on the FMCSA, which then transitions down to Carrier 411, highway, and all these others. Only when a DOT officer or a state cop pulls you over and does that inspection will it appear. So why does a state cop pull you over? Well, because you've been speeding, because you're changing lanes too fast, because they see a part hanging off of your truck and they want to stop you because, hey, there's a guaranteed ticket. I see that part hanging off. If they see something that they don't like, they're going to stop the truck. If the truck is going down the road and it's clean and everything is maintained, it looks good, doesn't have any issues, it's nighttime, all the lights are working on it, they're not going to stop that truck. They're going to look for the ones they think that they can find something wrong with. They don't want to spend their time an hour or hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever, inspecting a truck and find nothing. They're looking to find something. So that if they see it on the outside and they see a dirty truck, or they see a part, a tire problem, or an airline that's hanging down and rubbing on the bottom of your catwalk, all of these things that I know that they're looking for, I make sure that my truck is not doing. I make sure my truck is clean. I make sure my airlines are pulled up. I'm always checking my tires. I'm doing anything that I can to make sure I don't get stopped by the police. And it's killing me because I don't have these, quote, inspections that these brokers are requiring. But at the same time, it's saving me money, because whenever you get pulled over and you get inspection, it's a ticket to the driver and it's a ticket to the company. It affects your CSA score. It's a bad thing if they find something wrong. If they don't find something wrong, well, then you're all right. But they like to look and keep looking until they find something wrong. And I had a DOT officer tell me one time, I could go down to the Freightliner dealership, buy a brand new Cascadia, drive it 10 miles down the road to the scale house, and he could pull up underneath that thing and he can find something wrong with it. Something that isn't tightened, something that's rubbing that shouldn't be rubbing. So there's something wrong with every single truck out on the road if they really wanted to find something. So this inspection issue has been, like I said, has been a pet peeve of mine for a while, because it's what's keeping me and my truck from getting loaded. So Dan, you and I were just talking the other day about a program called Gen Logs. Tristan, have you ever heard of Gen Logs?
Yes, I have.
So those that don't know about GenLogs, Carrier Assure has now linked to GenLogs, and that's how I heard about it. So GenLogs has these sensors and cameras all over the interstate systems that they can tie into. And what these cameras and sensors are able to do are snap photos of my truck. So 2 months ago or 3 months ago at Carrier Assure, I had an F rating with my company. When someone told me this, I'm freaking out. I'm like, why do I have an F rating? So I log into Carrier Assure, I get an account, I log in, and they tell me the reason I have an F rating is no inspections. Well, I just logged in the other day and it's a B plus. And what it's showing is it's showing pings where my truck has been pinged in Indiana and Illinois and Tennessee and the Carolinas. I can see where they've actually pinged my truck, where GenLogs has. And what it's done is it's elevated my score because now they know I'm on the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's responsible, right? Like, and going back to what you're saying, Brian, that's a responsible way of reporting, right? Not just by, oh, that's the industry standard, it's inspections. Like, dude, you know nothing about inspections. You don't even have any equipment. What would you know? An audible air leak, right? Like, Brian, you want to go, why don't you just unhook a little bit of your airline and have an audible air leak so you can get stopped and go, oops, I'm sorry, and then just push it back in, right? Like, because anything audible is gonna trigger you to be stopped, right? So like these guys don't know that, and the reality is, inspections doesn't mean that you're not a real carrier. Because, for example, I have Tech and Velocity that are running. I don't have to worry about truck maintenance. These guys are on me. They send me emails. Hey, that truck needs to go in. It's got to go in for its 90-day. And we pass everything. Like I love that we had not, because California is so predatory in how that's why no one wants to come here. We've got all of our tickets, by the way, going down the hill because we've been doing Oregon and California for the last 6 years. And it's funny how we never get any tickets going up the hill, but when we come back down the hill, we're always getting tickets. So if anyone wants to ever get stopped or they need an inspection, come to California. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather, share this wealth of knowledge about being inspected. If everyone wants to get inspected, just come to California. Then you get an inspection. Then all the brokers like, yay, they have an inspection. They're a real carrier. Like, dude, do you know how easy it is? I could go in a Toyota Tundra and ask for an inspection.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling how an inspection is the golden ticket to becoming a real carrier. How about building a relationship and knowing that they exist? Just go to LinkedIn and look us up and say, hey, do these guys really run a trucking company?
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I called a broker the other day and he did a check on my company and he refused to load my truck because he said, I have reported one truck and I have 3 email addresses in a website. And I'm like, are you serious? I sent him an email back and I said, actually, I have 5 email addresses, not 3.
What does that have to do with anything?
I don't know, but he said it didn't. His exact words were, it didn't add up. So I actually took a screenshot. I went on the FMCSA and got his information, took a screenshot of it. So when I get an opportunity, I can call him. And this goes back to the BCS. Whenever I have someone tell me no, I say, can I speak to someone? And I invite them to the BCS because I know as soon as they meet me at the BCS, that no is going to become a yes. I'm that confident. Once they talk to me, once they know what I'm about, integrity over profits, that's my motto. So that's exactly what I do. If you tell me no, I'm going to do everything I can to get you to come to BCS because I want to meet you in person, shake your hand, and change that no to a yes.
Yeah. Well, you really can't get around the value of face-to-face conversations, especially as we're in this industry right now where we're talking about fraud, and it's just unfortunately it's becoming the norm for both sides to look even more skeptically at each other than we have in the past, which is saying something because there was already a lack of trust going into this season. So,
well, I'm glad it's happening. It's an opportunity for guys, for the good guys to get together and do business with good guys, and the bad guys will have the bad guys. And if you want to come over the good guys, I've heard you guys say add up, right? Add. Well, it's time to learn how to add what it costs to run a truck and then see, okay, does this budget really fit the carrier that I really want? I mean, it's that simple. It's basics.
Yeah. One of the things
you definitely get what you pay for. You know what I mean? Some of these carriers that I've seen out here, some of these trucks, I don't even know how they're out here on the road. Some of these guys, when you just see them, but that's from a carrier's perspective, looking at another one and comparing.
And to Brian, and a lot of, I see a lot of posts on this where, or a lot of comments, or no shipper has ever asked me what the truck looks like. Fair enough. And that's, it doesn't have to be the prettiest truck. It just has to get from point A to point B. I mean, that's fair. But what's not fair is understanding that truck that's 2002 has a different cost structure than someone like us who has brand new trucks, brand new trailers, operators that are, that communicate and speak the language,
And again, somebody that operates a fleet of 1,000 trucks, their cost structure is widely different than somebody who owns 5.
Yeah, and then and what happens is, why don't they get trucks from them then? Why do they need us 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 20 carriers? Like they don't need us if they have. Go ahead, go get those guys that are at scale.
I think one thing that's missing with respect to the brokers, and one thing that I try to get across is why you want to hire me and pay my rate versus another, is when I roll into a shipper in my truck, I'm representing you, the broker. And if you're rolling in a truck with parts falling off of it, and a guy that takes 2 hours to back into the dock, and he goes inside and he stinks and he's rude and everything, what's that say about the broker? You know what I'm saying? So I went into a customer, and I think it was in Georgia, I can't remember, but I went into this place. I pulled up, I went and checked inside, and they said, yeah, go ahead and put it in dock 2 and come inside and wait, because sometimes they don't want you to wait in their truck. So I go back my truck into the dock. I go inside and I wait, and I go inside and everybody's standing in the shipping office. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, everybody wanted to see your truck. I'm like, well, it's just a normal truck. They're like, yeah, we haven't seen that in a while, because all the trucks that came in, all the broker that was sitting in there was trash. The trucks were garbage. So I pull in with a square nose truck that has, lots of lights on it, no dents and dings and parts hanging off of it. And I said, it was raining that day too. And I said, oh, by the way, the floor's wet inside because I just did a trailer washout for you. And they're like, you did a trailer washout for us? I'm like, well, yeah. The trailer was dirty. I'm not going to come over here with a dirty trailer. And they just couldn't believe it. That I had a nice truck and I did a trailer washout. But that's what I try to tell these shippers when I go in is my reputation. And Tristan, you were talking about that. That's all we have out here is the reputation. My company reputation matters to me that much. So when I go into a shipper,
and you only get one.
You only get one. So when I go into the shipper, I'm wearing a nice uniform shirt. My logo is on there. I try to not have, my hair disheveled, what little bit I have. I try to look right, and I speak to them politely and respectfully, because that reputation, to me, it should get back to the broker. That shipper should be telling the broker, don't send that guy in again, or, hey, send that guy back. That's what I want. When I go into a shipper, I want that shipper to call that broker and say, send that carrier back. And I've had that happen a few times. I haven't been able to follow up on those loads based upon where the truck is at, but that's how I'm building my reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, like I was go back to the system, right? I mean, some of the carrier sales reps that you're talking to, they could care less what trucks we have, how we communicate. They're just they're processing. They're not serving. So it's about working with a different type of system, a different type of broker that really cares about their reputation. And those are different types of customers. Like not all customers are the same. Not all brokers, not all carriers are the same. The whole thing is having an option to use and know where the guys are at. Where is Tristan? Where is Brian? Where is the great brokers? Where are the great customers? That's it. Like, that's what we need to work on, because I'm not going to try to fix all of what they're trying to do with their system. Hyper growth, all these, let them all marry each other. Let's go find who the good guys are, and let's work with each other and understand each other's realities. And that's it. I mean, that's not that hard. That's basic, because if you don't care, because like our whole vision here is care for all. If you don't care, you're going to get hacked and you're going to face fraud. Yep. And if you don't want that, we're here, and we will show you. I'll show you how to read an insurance certificate, not a COI. Everyone thinks they wave around the COI as an immunity to all this stuff from happening. It's a freaking joke, dude. It's a joke, and you'll only know when there's a fire.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had a guy, a broker, told me the other day that he wouldn't load Progressive. My Progressive just ended anyway, but he wouldn't load Progressive, and he said that Progressive won't pay outside of a 400 or 500 mile radius. And I tried to explain to him, and I told him, I said, that's because that's what that carrier has set up, is a 400 or 500 mile radius. And I said, we have an unlimited radius. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, let me send you over my insurance papers. And so, Tristan, that's exactly what you're talking about. The COI does not show what my radius is and what my coverage is. So brokers, just to let you know, a carrier can set up a radius. So, I'm in the Indianapolis area. I can set up a 400 mile radius, and that's all the coverage covers. If I go outside of that 400 mile radius, the coverage don't happen. When you do a claim, they deny it. So I had to switch to unlimited coverage, unlimited radius, so that I could be covered in any state that I go to. And this broker didn't even understand that. He just thought everyone with Progressive had a 400 mile limit, and that was good enough, right? So I was trying to explain to him that, hey, you have a choice, and I have chose unlimited. And so I had to send him my paperwork, and they accepted me after I sent all my paperwork.
And it goes back to the system he works in, right? Like he probably went to a meeting and said, guys, Progressive is this because we just had this happen. But they're bundling us up with just that data, right? They don't have the intellect to go look and say, hey, look, let me look at that endorsement that you have. Maybe you have an endorsement that's past 400 or 500 miles.
Yeah. Well,
right?
it's so lazy too. I mean, honestly, like we can blame the training environment or the system that they're in, and then there's value in that. But at the same time, like it's almost like we give people an out doing that, because if you really wanted to work with a carrier, you really wanted to build a relationship, you would be intentional about finding out everything you could about that carrier, finding out what their needs are. If you wanted to know what they needed per mile so that you could add value to them as a partner, you would ask them, hey, what do you need per mile? If you had a question about insurance, hey, I heard Progressive does this. Is your policy the same as that, or is it different? And you could find that out. It's just laziness, I think. We rely too much on our systems and not enough on the communication.
No one is searching for absolute truth, right? They just want to be like, okay, that's what the data says. I'm not going to underwrite that. Oh, that's what I was told that if they have a COI or Lloyd's of London cargo, for example, right? I know that there's no one wants to work with Lloyd's of London, but I can tell you right now, no insurance company wants to pay out a claim. Like, dude, it's just that simple, man. Like, and if you're going out misrepresenting that you know everything about your carrier, and that's what I want to tell the shippers. I'm like, how well does your broker know exactly? Like, are they looking out after your best interests, or are they looking out after that profit or that revenue KPI that they have? Because if they were very intentional about it, they would be calling carriers that are great and saying, hey, what does it really cost to run your trucking operation? And can you tell me more about your insurance? Like, why aren't you getting that information? Because as a broker, you also have a responsibility to your shipper. I mean, the ones that you set out to serve, the way the system is, you're going to underserve every single one of them. And it took you 4, 5, 6, 10 months to get this account, only to underserve them by hiring a guy from DAT.
Yeah. One of the ideas I've been toying with in my mind, and I haven't really shared this with anybody yet. Maybe I've shared with Trey or maybe a couple other people. But I'd really like for there to be a way at the summit where carriers, you can bring your brokers, or brokers, you can bring your carriers, and sit down and have like a deep dive into how to work well together. So if you really have a broker that you've been working with or you want to work with, sit down with them and lay out your cost structure. Say, hey, this is what I need per mile. This is why I need that. Or have a session where it's brokers only, and you have a panel of carriers, and the panel of carriers at the front is teaching brokers like, hey, this is what a 1 to 5, this is what an owner operator's cost structure looks like. This is what a 2 to 5 truck operations cost structure looks like. This is what a fleet's cost structure looks like. Quote accordingly. I think that'd be incredibly valuable to have something like that, where, because again, education and training is one of the or the lack thereof is one of the reasons why the trust is not there.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, that's such an amazing. And we could close the doors, and we could say, "Show me yours, and I'll show you mine."
Yeah.
100%.
Like,
because
why not?
One of the valuable pieces about the summit is that you get some people who come to the summit who are simply drivers, and you get some people who come to the summit who are simply the account executive broker in the seat. But most of the people who come to the BCS or who want to be involved in the BCS network are at some level, they're decision makers within their company. And so they have access to the information that can allow them to be better partners with their carriers or with their brokers. So I think that would be absolutely phenomenal time. And we can even make it an optional session where say, hey, we have 10 brokers and 10 carriers, and do that. Close door session, and just have a conversation about what it takes to operate.
And Dan, going to, that was my first BCS in Fort Worth, and we had that round table of everyone going around, and it's funny is it's exactly the world of freight. Like I just saw, but in a smaller room, the broker sits there on top of the table and waits for you to come to them. I'm like, dude, that's not the way to go. If I was a broker, I did exactly what I put on my broker hat and my carrier hat. Ask Brian. I talked to every single driver that was at BCS. I didn't wait for them to come up to me. Like, dude, open hands, bro.
Way with the brokers. I was the exact same way with the brokers, and I made the mistake of I collected everybody's business cards, and I made the mistake of not writing on the back of it, what they were offering and freight and everything. So I will do that this next time. But I still have that stack of business cards, and I'm still finding brokers today. I just onboarded with SPI the other day, and Dan, we know the same person over at SPI from the summit, and I pulled out his card, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this guy. So I did the same thing, Tristan. I tried to go up to every single broker and shake their hand, and introduce myself and get their card and talk to them about their freight, their lanes, and what they had to offer. I felt an immense value in that.
And you know how there's like an inspection or a vetting process for carriers. What I was doing, as well as I haven't booked a load in 3 years, but I was talking to my dispatcher and I go, hey, this broker's here. Let me see what people are saying about them on DAT, or tell me their Google reviews. Right. And I'm like, dude, these guys have 1 star. How am I supposed to trust them? And I get it. People get mad when something happens, but if you're a great broker, you should have 3 stars or more on DAT.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that simple, right? Like it really is that simple. Like there's no way. And you could say, oh, well, people talk bad about us. And I'm like, no, it's probably bad for the most part.
Yeah.
It's your system.
Yeah. Well, you often find people too, they usually, whenever they have a comment to make, it's either really good or really bad. And usually people say things when they're mad, when it's bad. I try not to leave any reviews with anybody. I've only left 1 review once with a guy, and it was over Progressive Insurance. We spent 2 hours trying to book a load, and then after we sent him the COI, then he's like, oh no, you got Progressive, we're not going to load with you. It's like, are you serious? I just wasted 2 hours. My truck isn't booked. You could have told me this in the beginning. Hey, we don't load with Progressive. Okay, I'd have moved on to the next broker. One thing I will say about these packets, and we're still going back to that fraud. Everybody's using Highway and My Carrier packets. And then you got these ones that are sending me PDFs. If you send me a PDF, my flag is going up big time. If I'm getting a PDF from a broker saying, fill this out, this is our carrier packet, I'm already extremely skeptical of you. So if anybody out there is watching and you're a broker and you're not using Highway or one of the main onboarding platforms, you're asking to, I'm not going to do it. If you send me a PDF, I'm not onboarding with you. Not unless I get in contact with someone on the inside of your brokerage. I start having a conversation with them, and we're starting to send emails and text messages back and forth. And I realize who you really are.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. There are just frankly too many tools, too many options out there for us to be operating with antiquated, simple things like available PDF. Plus, the PDFs take too much time. I mean, if you're a brokerage and you don't in some way have a way to pull information directly or indirectly from Safer, then what are you even doing? To be quite frank, there's a lot of work we got to do though.
It takes too much time on our end as well. I'd say Highway is probably the quickest onboarding for me because they save my information and all I got to do is just click yes if the information hasn't changed. RMIS makes me resubmit the same information over and over again, which takes more time. For me, the most streamlined, easiest process is definitely Highway. Yeah. We all know about Carrier 4. What is it? No, 5.1
or Carrier
5.1. Yeah, that's what's coming out soon. He's talking about that, and he's out there saying that it's going to be the number one thing out there in the world, and no one's going to use any other platform, which I hope is not true. But
you guys want to know what the number one thing is? I mean, I just see a lot of when I was booking freight since 2004, Carrier 4.1 has always been a thing to look at. You know what the easiest way is? Actually having a conversation with them and looking at them and going and visiting them and saying, how can I build my business? Because I've helped carriers out by visiting them and saying, okay, you have 36 trucks. I see those. Now I'm going to go after the customers and say, hey, I need you to be at this rate. Like just what Dan was saying. You have to go with not the backwards approach. I'd rather do it the long way. It's just so much more sustainable and I don't have to go get a job.
Tristan, if you're gonna meet me, you're gonna have to spend 2 weeks in the truck on the top bunk, buddy.
Yeah, it's fine. Let's go. I don't think you're gonna want.
You're small enough to get up there.
Yeah. I'll just carry. You can just carry me on your backpack. We'll get all the loads from the shippers. Carry me on. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, we're coming up to it, my friends. Always good to talk with you guys. Looking forward to seeing you guys very soon. Tristan, you mentioned you're going to be in Vegas for Manifest, correct?
Yeah, I'll be there for the 9th to the 13th. So yeah, let's hang out. Okay. I'll be there for your guys' event.
Okay.
And see whoever else is going to be at Manifest. I'll be there.
Okay, very cool. And Brian, I'll see you around. We still need to grab coffee at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And any brokers that are looking to reach out to me, you can do so through Dan. One of the reasons we were trying to keep it under the radar is what I'm doing to fight the fraud from the carrier side. I didn't want to, let that information out there. So if you are interested in hiring me, using me as your carrier, reach out to Dan. Dan will give you my information, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, one thing Brian and I talk all the time on texts and phones, and we share fuel, we share trailers, and that's really what's going to prevent fraud, guys.
I got a trailer in October, right? You guys have only know each other for a few months.
Yeah. And Brian has talked to some of my guys here, and they've helped each other, and I'm happy to do that. Like that's where it's all about. That's where it's all about for me.
I got a trailer I'll sell you, Tristan, that I think I just bought the wrong one. I bought a sheet and post trailer, and it's a little bit too heavy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What year
I don't have one of them light trucks like you got. I got one of them old school trucks that's a little bit heavier.
But he's got to operate in California. He's got to have light everything in California.
Yeah, I've got to have skirts.
It's got skirts. It's got air ride. It's got the auto inflate. It's got all that.
Yeah, and it's got to have. Oh man, it sucks. And then they just threw a new rule. It's like a just kidding. Okay, guys, there's no more electric. And then all of I was just on the phone with tech yesterday, and they were saying, well, Tristan, guess what? You don't have to buy electric anymore, but we ordered all electrics because we thought that's where it was going.
God bless the government. Just what are we doing?
Yeah.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
yeah. And I mean, I that's why I'm like, dude, maybe I should just keep brokering. Forget all these rules. But
I have
no,
a feeling that California withdrew that rule because of Trump, and he would sue and probably win. So they're just going to wait until he leaves. So in 4 years, you can expect that electric rule to come back.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just keep them in stock.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, again, it's I love building relationships, and that's what it's all about for me. And if I'm gonna have to do this over the internet, swipe me left because I'm going towards meeting people, or whatever. Swipe left or right, but whatever it is,
Whatever it is.
yeah, swipe me out of your internet because I want to go connect with people.
Clearly, Tristan's not been on Tinder for a while, so
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's one of the most beneficial and one of the most satisfying things about what we're doing is we're not just having an event. We're building a network. One of the things that I'm most excited about for 2025 within the BCS is this BCS freight network, where we're building the most trusted network in freight. It's going to take some time, but when it comes to brokers and carriers learning to work together, trusting each other, forming relationships like you guys have. You guys have known each other for about 5 months. No, not even 5 months, 3 or 4 months now. And you're already talking, you're already sharing information, you're already invested personally in watching and seeing the other one succeed. That's the kind of network that this industry has needed for a very, very long time. And so we're going to have more information about that coming out in the next few weeks about how we can continue to build that. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys again. Brian, I'll see you again as soon as we can get together for coffee or breakfast or whatever we'll do. But I will definitely see both of you in Indianapolis this April.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Well, I'll see you guys. Thanks, Dan, for having us on. And Brian, thank you for sharing all of your fraud intelligence.
Tristan, it's awesome as always. Dan, appreciate you having me.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Take care. Have a great day.
See you guys.